Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the Professor Greg Dooley and the Pundit Steve Clark. Men, take the mic.
That's right. It's the Professor and the Pundit with Greg Dooley and Steve Clark. We're presented by Nick Hopwood, a certified financial planner, founder, and president of Peak Wealth Management. Retire with confidence. Greg, can you sense the enthusiasm in my voice today after Michigan beats Penn State 24-15?
I can, and I got to say, Steve, from an idea for the two of us at Oscars to earlier this year to 500 followers across all platforms to nearly 50,000 plays, Steve, across Apple and Spotify. Holy moly. Thank you, listeners. The best way to thank us is to follow us, rate, and share with your friends. And by the way, we are on the new Autograph app, and they've added new podcast features. You can zip back and forward and do that kind of thing on the app now, which makes it a lot more easier. If you do, the link for Autograph is in the show notes. And the code is there as well as Prof Pun. No spaces, no word. If you want to try out the Autograph app.
One F and Prof.
That's right.
Michigan's reputation was on the line. And for those that think they couldn't win a game without Connor Stallions,
this is hail to the conquering heroes right here. This was an impressive win. And for those who thought all those other victories were tainted, put this in your pipe and smoke.
That was Rick Neuheisel on CBS Sports just after the game. Greg, you went to Happy Valley this weekend. Tell me about the experience. Was it your first time there?
First time there, and Steve, you happen to know, I had quite the luxurious trip out there. I actually left Ann Arbor at 10 a.m. Saturday morning. How is this possible? When you have a direct private flight right in to Happy Valley, you can leave at 10, which, wild, Steve, is actually much later. Then I get started for home games, of course, because I want to hear your pregame show. So to leave Ann Arbor at 10 a.m. for a noon game in Happy Valley, amazing experience. I feel so fortunate to have done this. Yes, was I handed a mimosa when I boarded this plane? I was. What's the Seinfeld line when he's up in first class with the model? More of anything? More of everything. That's my experience. What happened? So, yeah, we touched down and we got shuttled right to the game, had incredible seats upstairs. Everyone says this, like, it's an incredibly huge structure. And it's a nice looking stadium. It's much different, obviously, than Michigan Stadium people know. But outside, it does kind of look like an erector set. It's like they kept adding supports here and there, like to make, when they added on the structure, it's a little disjointed. And logistically, to your point, you can imagine, I left in the morning and I've never been to this place before, and I'm trying to just understand this huge stadium, trying to find where to go, but made it up there. It was just a beautiful day. Obviously a huge win. Number 999 all time, 22 straight in the conference. What a day, and what an experience, Steve. What an experience.
We'll be talking more about your experience in Happy Valley during the game a little bit later. But first, let's go through a quick recap of the game. You know the final score, 24-15. Blake Corum, 2 touchdowns, 145 yards. Donovan Edwards with his longest rush of the season, which happened to be for a touchdown for 22 yards. But the storyline in this, Greg, is that Michigan ran the ball on its final 32 plays. It's the longest streak of consecutive rushing attempts in any game in college football over the past 20 seasons. That, according to ESPN Stats and Information. The Wolverines only had 8 pass attempts. I think they were 7 of 8 for 60 yards on that one. The last time they had fewer than 8 pass attempts, you have to go all the way back to 1987 and Demetrius Brown quarterbacking this team. Any guess on the team that they faced?
No idea.
Northwestern Wildcats was the correct answer on that one. From
so
1987 on Halloween night.
In the early Bo era, that was about what they did. You know, they passed like maybe a baker's dozen times tops. But, I mean, that's incredible. 1987.
The incredible thing to me, besides the 32 straight rushes, was that Penn State led the nation in rush defense at 60 yards per game, and Michigan ran on them for 227. How many couching coaches would have abandoned the running game after the first 2 series from what they saw in their armchairs.
Yeah, I think a lot of them would. I think a lot of them would have flinched. And
just say, no, we're passing from now on.
Yeah, you're right, though, about their defense. They played the part. They were ferocious, man. They were ferocious, especially in those first 2 series. You had to be going, uh-oh. We're in for one here.
It's kind of what I expected with the Michigan running game kind of struggling the way they were. I've seen enough Penn State games throughout the season. I think most people only saw one Penn State game this year. Okay. I've seen a few. And they just blow people off the line of scrimmage. And when you can do that, the quarterback has to throw the ball in a hurry, and their tight coverage from corners and safeties don't give receivers much room. So even if they even catch the ball, they're not getting very far with it.
You know, you got to give credit. So let's assume that wasn't exactly the game plan. We've had kind of a complementary balance. You got to give it to Sherrone Moore and those guys because they must have made that call, right? Don't you assume that?
Absolutely,
yeah,
they made the call.
No, like Harbaugh didn't write on a piece of paper, just run till we can't run anymore. No way. And how bold, though, because you could tell the pressure right at the end of the game. He just let all his emotions out. But what pressure was on this man? And to have the boldness to do that, to go, we're just going to keep going with this. Man.
Considering it's first and foremost on their minds when you see how so many of the games have even pass to even run, where it's only like plus or minus 2 in a lot of these games. So it's always on their mind. When they think about first downs, it's almost even that it's run and pass to be unpredictable. This was as predictable as you could be to Penn State's defense. We're just going to run, and Penn State's defense keeps creeping up. They think they're playing into their hands, the way Michigan's calling plays. But yes, it was bold.
Courageous.
But Sherrone Moore coaches that offensive line. He knows them better than anybody else and thought, we do a few things here. And Michigan got the 4 explosives for 20 or more yards rushing on 4 plays that they needed. They were 4 very, very big plays that helped Michigan get enough points to win this game.
Crazy, man. I think it's incredible courage. In a temporary interim situation where you're covering somebody, you're kind of acting like a coach, right? What are we supposed to do here? And what you're supposed to do is mix it up and do these things. I give him so much credit, and I am sure that's why he broke down at the end of the game, because they knew they were going in with his plan. You know, at the end, when they switched to just the run, in that moment, you saw it all come out, where he really lost control and, and all the swears and everything. Yeah. You kind of see why, right?
Well, for the number of people that wear out their carpets or put, holes in their socks pacing up and down during the course of the game, it's always a magnitude of 10 to the actual people that are involved. So it was a long game in that regard because there was a lot of 3 and outs or 1 first down, and now we're given the opportunity for the other team to strike back. There's a lot there. And sometimes when you go to the running game, you're limiting those possessions. Michigan had that long possession after the fumble that Penn State had, and it took like 6 to 8 minutes off the clock. That's fewer possessions for Penn State's offense to figure things out. Yet Penn State, Greg, did want to counterpunch. When they got punched in the mouth and they were down by 2 scores, the very first play after that was Katron Allen's longest run of the game, going down to the middle of the field. I think it was 34 yards. But the significant part of that play is not that it was their longest play or that it put them back to within striking distance. It was the fact that big Kenneth Grant, whose weight, by the way, Greg, is down to 340 at the beginning of the season, tracked him down from behind.
It was awesome. And I remember it was such a spectacle. The big man tracked him down, and he made a couple plays like that. Do we know how fast he is? Now, he's not faster than Katron Allen. Katron had to change directions a couple of times, but the fact that he made that play was huge, man. It was huge. What other big moments did you see? I missed the Corum fumble on the second possession, and that ball was bouncing around. I think that was huge early on that we covered that ball, holding Penn State to that field goal. They had 5 snaps inside the 5 in that possession where they got the field goal. I thought that was huge. The Aller fumble with 11:40 to go, and then the next possession, JJ makes that wicked cut on 4th to convert 4th down to get that gain, a big play. Our special teams, we haven't talked about them all season. We covered the punts this time. We had good punts when we were punting. We made a field goal when we need to. I know it was short, but it was dead nuts. That was big. But the Doman punt, when they brought the ball into our territory, but they had that push in the back call, right, which put them back another 20-plus yards. That was a big play, and I thought we got a break there on that one.
Maybe. The end result is that Penn State was deep in their own territory, which is significant.
Steve, he was in Michigan territory.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll take it back on the other end and say that Michigan's first punt of the game or second punt of the game should have been called for running into the kicker, which would have given Michigan a first down. So I think those two plays happened to even out.
What did you think about the pass interference on Barner? But, of course, statistically, it doesn't count.
Correct.
But they called pass interference. What did you see there?
So what I saw in the replay was that the Penn State player made the contact first, okay, with his head backwards. And then what Penn State fans saw was how Barner basically tackled the defender and wrestled him down to the ground. And when you see this on replay and you give it a fair assessment, the ball hits the body, and then Barner tackles the guy, which is fine because the ball has already made contact with a player. There's no such thing as pass interference once the ball is touched by somebody. Even if it's on the defensive line and it's tipped, there's no such thing as pass interference.
I think there were two things. I think they didn't like the pass interference call against Penn State in the first place, and they didn't like the violent thing that happened to their player with Barner. To me, nothing should have been called. The first part, the second part, nothing. If it were flipped, I think I would have saw that as a touch foul. But hey, that's how it goes. And Steve, you really liked Will Johnson's performance out there.
I did. He broke up two plays in the end zone. So one was early on. You were talking about how Michigan forced Penn State to get an early field goal.
Yep.
They threw a corner pass to Dante Cephas. Now, this is a guy that coming into last week didn't have a single touchdown. They thought he was going to be the number 2 receiver. He has a few catches, but not for a lot and no touchdown grabs. That changed last week in the Maryland game. And they threw that fade ball to Cephas in the first quarter in College Park, and it was complete. It was the same type of play, at least a fade in the same direction in the end zone. But Will Johnson played good enough defense that it forced Cephas to try to grab it with one hand. Couldn't do it. Didn't interfere with him. That was great. And then, of course, when Penn State went for 2 at the end of the fourth quarter, Will Johnson was the guy who broke up the 2-point conversion. So Will Johnson was absolutely extraordinary.
Yep, fantastic, man. What else, Steve? Like, bigger picture, what do you think? I mean, we talked about how much was at stake here, right? Mm-hmm. What, if you turn this around, if we lose this game, like how do you frame it now sitting here? Because I got back so quick, Steve and I actually hung out after the game. We're able to break it down a little bit. That's the if you zip in and out, that's what you can do. But what were you thinking, man, with this? The stakes just seem so high.
It's extremely high. And a lot of times when Michigan beats Penn State and vice versa, there's a certain amount of ho-humness about the victor that says, well, that's how it should have been, and now let's move on. This was a monumental clash because so much was on the line for both teams. And I think from the Michigan perspective, if Michigan had lost this game, and you and I are in here, first of all, we'd probably be hungover. We would not be in a good mood. But more importantly than that is the rush to judgment that you already feel is on this Michigan team for what Connor Stallions meant would just be amplified as, see,
when you're not cheating, this is what happens.
Exactly. And there's this narrative out that before Michigan won the Big Ten championships, it was the 2020 version of what Michigan really is, 2-4. The prior years before that, they were a win away, beating Ohio State in 2018 and 2019. And if they had won those games, they would have won the Big Ten East and presumably would have won the Big Ten championship because the West has never won the Big Ten championship.
Right.
Okay? So the stakes for Michigan in losing that would be everybody avalanching on top of what Michigan for their presumed thoughts, and it's probably not even correct and not even fully formed, but that's what the label would be. History is written according to the victors and to the winners. They've said that more than once just here in Ann Arbor. So that's why it's so important. When you go back a few years ago to the dust up in Spartan Stadium when, Bush was cutting up the Spartan emblem, the winner of that game was going to be justified in why they did it. Because in the battle of he said, she said, whoever wins the game is what everyone's going to latch onto as the winning argument.
I think even the tunnel thing would be looked at differently had Michigan lost that game.
Yes.
You're like, well, how could that be? It's just how it works.
That's how strong it is.
The narrative. So you've got people on either side here. You didn't change anyone's mind, but you didn't give them this ammunition. And for Michigan, so important to keep on this roll. By the way, we talked about the tiebreaker. Had Penn State won this game, we'd be pretty much done. Okay? Yeah, so anyway, go ahead, Steve.
You don't have your coach. You didn't win the TRO the morning of. And losing to Penn State probably meant that you were not going to win the tiebreaker. Therefore, the season would basically ended today if Michigan had lost.
Yeah.
And then we'd be all upset and sour grapes about Tony Batiti, the Big Ten, and how Jim Harbaugh being not allowed to be in the game influenced the game. The irreparable harm part of the argument in the TRO would feel enforced for the people that love the University of Michigan. Right now, we don't have to worry about it because Michigan won the game anyway, and it was emotional, and everybody's feeling great. On the other side is something almost as equal as devastating for Penn State in not winning or losing that game. The opinions that are going on for Penn State is that this is the same old thing happening over and over again, that James Franklin can't get over the hump. It's a ceiling that under Franklin may not be able to eclipse. A top 10 team last year, but couldn't beat Ohio State and Michigan. His record against ranked teams are unbelievable. It mostly comes to losing against Michigan and Ohio State as a part of that record. Penn State fans are going to be excited that Michigan and Ohio State isn't going to be on their schedule every year and that the playoff is expanding from 4 to 12. However, the Big Ten is bringing in USC. It's bringing in Washington. It is bringing in Oregon. Even though the playoff expansion is going from 4 to 12, it doesn't mean that there's going to be 4 Big Ten teams selected in those at-large spots. A program's fan base just isn't going to settle for being the same and doing the same thing over and over again. They want to see signs of being better. And if they had split with Michigan and Ohio State, they could at least tell their fan base, we made progress.
You heard Franklin's press conference, and I don't know if he led with this, but of course he goes, 2 losses against the number 1 and number 3 team in the country. Okay, Penn State's like a top 10 program right now, and they're really good. The big problem is they're third in their division, okay? Clearly number 3. So I'm walking out of that game, man. Penn State fans are so frustrated. 2-point conversion this. Franklin getting key with the play calling that. They are frustrated because, as you pointed out, Steve, they feel they are either our peers or a superior football team. They're pissed. One of the things was the 2-point conversions. I thought the first one was dumb. Okay, you don't go for 2 points that early in the game. You just don't, okay? If that's your philosophy, then you should always just go for 2. If you feel, okay, I don't think a lot of people argue with me, but I saw he also got crap for going for the 2 at the end of the game when they're down 2 scores and needed a 2-point conversion. They needed 1 to tie the game, right? You got to go for it there. And I know, and people were criticizing him. He got criticized in the press conference, and I didn't think he gave a really good answer. But he's right. You have to go. You have to know the outcome. Did you get it or not? If you miss it, you know you need 2 possessions, and then you can act accordingly. You can get the onside kick and kick a quick field goal if it's the right thing to do, and then try another one because you have to. But you have to try it. And fans didn't like it. They wanted to go to the end of the game and be on the line like it's, I don't know, a psychological advantage or something. Sorry, these aren't third graders, okay? They're grown-ass men.
Well, you have to take the 2 sometime.
Yeah, exactly.
Do I need 2 possessions in 3 minutes?
Yes.
Or do I have 1 possession in 3 minutes?
I know.
And it sets up how you do play calling the rest of the way.
I can't believe we're defending James Franklin. I actually felt bad for him because the guy asking the question was like on him. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
But that is the frustration of the local people, even the media involved. They are tired of Penn State. If you go back to the end of the championship game in 2016 where they beat Wisconsin, ever since then, Penn State is 1-13 against teams ranked in the top 10.
With this defense, man, like this defense, they're so good. I was so impressed. I think ours was better. Okay, we put just as much pressure on their quarterback and made him do really bad things and rattled him. But their defense was fantastic. That's one of the big reasons we ran the ball.
This was being promoted, and I agreed that this was James Franklin's best football team. His best ever. And better than the one that won the Big Ten championship in 2016. Okay, this is the best. Ohio State's looking a little bit vulnerable. And we did the right thing in 2022 in getting our freshman quarterback ready by giving him significant playing time behind Sean Clifford throughout the entire 22 season. And our defense is outstanding. What more can you ask for? And they lost.
Yep.
Both times. In different ways. They lost at Ohio State because of Marvin Harrison Jr. in the Ohio State passing game. Saturday, they lost to Michigan because of Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, and J.J. McCarthy's running game. You lost in 2 totally different ways. Penn State people are at a crossroads right now. And they know that James Franklin can recruit, but they also know that he can't seem to win a big game. So what do you do?
And I know, Steve, we talked a lot about James Franklin, but it looks like behind the scenes, the finger pointing was on the OC, who apparently lost his job shortly after the game.
In James Franklin's press conference, he talked about how the offense needed to do better. It was an indication to the people that were in the room that he was sort of shifting where this blame might be going. And sure enough, I mean, within 24 hours after the game, it's over for Mike Yurcich.
You start to look at the coaching decision. So you get the 2-point conversion stuff again, and if you get the extra point in the first half and don't go for it there, we're not having necessarily the same conversation about the 2-point conversion. I don't want to nerd out on everyone, but I'd argue you still go for it if you score when you're down 14. But then you get like the flea flicker where Aller looks lost, throws the ball away, and they get the grounding penalty. Mm-hmm. You start to get this cuteness, and of course, if it works, right, it's brilliant. But it just seems like they're outthinking themselves a little bit here, and I know the fans are frustrated. You heard boos. I think you heard them on TV. There were boos like echoing down and multiple times. And when they missed the 2-point conversion, people were chucking stuff in the end zone, and there was no caller that they were complaining about. They were pissed, just pissed at the outcome here. So, they were throwing bottles, and fans wanted a head, and they got one. I don't know if this is the one they wanted, but that's what they were offered up. And it's not the first time in Michigan's history that teams have made changes after Michigan's come in and delivered a devastating loss. Hopefully not the last, but wow.
But you know what happens? You fire your coordinators, and then you have no one left to fire but yourself.
That's right.
And then the other aspect of this is that Manny Diaz is a former head coach from the Miami Hurricanes. He's done an absolutely outstanding job on that defense. A lot of people are figuring he's just leaving next year anyway, be a head coach again. Penn State could be in a situation where they have 2 new coordinators coming in at a time when USC, Oregon, and Washington are coming in.
I do give Diaz credit. Like I said, that defense is absolutely ferocious. And it's not just the penetration. Some of the hits and some of the things they were doing was really impressive. And I'm not saying they were better than Michigan, but, man, I wonder if a lot of fans are going to start angling to do what you suggest, Steve, and maybe he's the next head coach at Penn State.
Audrey Snyder of The Athletic, that's Penn State's beat writer for that publication, actually wrote a story about how usually the fans are there at the tunnel to cheer the team through, and this time it was F-bombs and people throwing things on the field. A player was yelling at a fan. There was a lot on the line for Penn State in this game. Maybe not as much as Michigan, but pretty darn close.
Yep. And again, thank goodness, Steve, we do not have to go through this Western opponent cumulative record mess with all the crap going on in the West right now. No matter what, the Michigan-Ohio State game will send the East winner of the Big Ten championship, which is great.
Yes, we're no longer rooting for Nebraska, okay, which was really hard for me.
PJ Fleck.
I hope, I'm not sure Penn State realizes, because I haven't seen it written anywhere, they're in a significant lead for the tiebreaker.
They would have
a significant lead with 2 weeks to go.
Assuming Michigan beat Ohio State.
Yes.
Okay.
Scary.
Sorry. Yeah.
But this whole game for Michigan, and I'll just tie it up with this, was a referendum on Michigan's renaissance. Because the allegations are basically arguing this is the reason why Michigan won in 2021 and why they won in 2022. And that's the beginning of Michigan's renaissance.
Yeah.
And it's a referendum on that game. And Michigan, who in the last 2 weeks outscored their opponents 91-13 since the scandal broke out, now they beat Penn State, a top 10 team, on the road.
With our coach serving a suspension, right? Big deal. And, yeah, of course we've got to beat Maryland. But I'd say, Steve, this was even more important. Like, we could lose to Ohio State, but they're a really good team. I think people understand that. It was this one. It was this one we had to have. It was this one. There'll be some of that with Ohio if we don't win.
I think there'll be a lot of it.
Okay. How about losing both?
Right.
This was the one I think you really had to have. And like, Ohio State's going to be the number 1 team in the land. Okay.
Yeah. Michigan fans would be on an island.
Yeah. Right.
All to itself, and probably expelled there. They're not on their own island because they want to be. They'd be expelled to an island all by themselves if Michigan had lost both of those games.
So, Nick, we're at halftime of the show, and at halftimes of football games, it's the time for the team and the coaches to talk and kind of do an assessment on how things are going. Is there a version of that in your world with your clients?
Absolutely, Greg. In every meeting, we're reviewing where we are relative to our goals. We're reviewing the investments. We're checking up on the beneficiaries, making sure we're tax optimized, making sure the estate plan is in place, and anything that we've missed, right? It's our time to review everything and make sure that we're on track.
All right. Makes sense, man.
Nick, sometimes I do that at the end of the year, but more lately I've been trying to do this a little more often at the end of each quarter.
Yeah, and let's do it even more frequently, Steve. How about every month, right? On the first of the month, let's wake up and let's update that net worth statement. Why not?
Net worth being, hey, all my assets versus what I owe, liabilities, mortgage, and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
what are the benefits of that?
Absolutely. It's going to be all of your liquid, right? Your cash, your investments, and your non-liquid real estate or closely held businesses, subtracting out the liabilities. And, if cash flow is good, it doesn't necessarily mean because the investments went down that your net worth has declined, because also you are paying down your liabilities each month. But it's a way to become more intimate with your finances.
And we are in the fourth quarter of 2023, so if you want to get a hold of Nick and ask him any questions, or you just want to ask for a couple of ideas, go to peakwm.com. That's peakwm.com. Let's talk about the elephant in the room subject and kind of try to move things along. A meeting in Ann Arbor to hear both sides of the issue this Friday on the temporary restraining order. There was a real surprise in the Countdown to Kickoff studio at WTKA that the TRO wasn't granted overnight Friday into Saturday morning. Multiple contacts that we have had working within the studio at the time definitely thought it was like nearly a formality that this was going to happen. And
we
it
live
didn't.
in Arkansas, Steve. Like, I got texts from all kinds of people that say, I personally know this person or that person involved here, and this is what's going to happen. Did you get like one of those? Or you got It's so funny. But it didn't happen. I had the same thing. I happened to be traveling with some people who were directly involved with all this. And
they had the right judge.
But it left everyone from the top administrators to professors and pundits.
Pundits.
To fans at home refreshing, scrolling, checking texts.
Yes.
It's completely bizarre. And again, the outcome would be, is Jim Harbaugh going to be on the sideline or not? You can't make this stuff up.
Well,
man. You can't make it up.
We made the joke that it's like the team should be on the bus by now heading to Happy Valley. Is Jim on the bus? And will
Can
they
he be on the bus?
Will they pull over a block away and kick him out? I mean, we were making the joke, like if this was a home game, it'd be like dropping somebody off at Pioneer.
Right. Yeah, it's great. I just think it's funny. Do like the Pennsylvania State Police intervene and like what are you doing here? It's just insane. So that was nuts. So he did serve a game now, and I think that's a good thing because no matter what happens, we can say, well, yes, we went for a restraining order, but he served the game. So there's one. We did 3 for the cheeseburger thing. We served one, Steve. So the train's left the station, right? The legal process is going on. So we have to kind of do now whatever the legal process says. But wouldn't you think it might be strategically smart if you want Jim Harbaugh on the sideline to sit him for Maryland and go, here's 2. But I don't think you have that. Once you get the restraining order, you either take it or you don't. I don't think you can stick it in your pocket and then show up for the Ohio State game and wave it at the usher and go, I'm good.
Yeah, it's a yellow card.
Right.
It's a Buckeye card.
Or,
I'm coming in.
I don't know. Maybe we're feeling good. Maybe I won't use it for Ohio State.
Everybody feels good right now about the prospect of Michigan going into College Park and beating Maryland this Saturday with or without Jim Harbaugh, who, according to the Big Ten suspension, says he can coach Sunday through Friday. The one thing, and we concentrate on how upset Michigan fans are, there's plenty of Big Ten coaches that are upset that the suspension from Tony Petitti in the Big Ten office allows Coach Jim Harbaugh to be involved in the planning and the preparation, allowed to actually come into his office at the building.
Can I ask you something about that? Does it matter to you that it specifically says regular season, that he used those words, Petitti and the suspension? I know they have the right to do more, but he said for the remaining games in the regular season. That's how it's written. So It didn't say the rest of the season. It said the regular season.
Right.
Is that significant to you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because one, it makes me wonder if they have the jurisdiction to do that for their own championship game and the college football playoff. They may not be able to.
Yeah.
But I think what's happened here is that Tony Petitti, in a way, and he's public enemy number 1 right now at the University of Michigan and the Michigan fan base, there is a bit of a compromise in here that has gotten the other side a little bit angry too. Why just the end of the regular season? Why is he allowed to coach in the building Sunday through Friday? And when you make a decision that makes nobody happy, you start to wonder if it's somewhere in the middle is kind of right. I know that's blasphemy.
Okay.
What I'm saying is absolute blasphemy.
I didn't know where you were going with that. I understand what you're saying. No one's happy, but maybe that's the right balance.
Maybe.
Okay.
So Michigan fans are so upset they want to leave the conference.
You just blew my mind.
Did I?
Yeah, that's good. No, it's good. It's good. I like it.
I
teach a leadership class. I teach a leadership class where we talk about making tough decisions, right? That's an interesting thing. Like, no one's really happy. It's like two kids who want the bigger piece of the pie. Well, you cut it and you pick. Like one of those situations, right? Where everyone's kind of, oh, gosh darn it, Dad.
When both sides feel screwed, there might be something in the middle. Of course, our dream, though, Greg, is to have Tony Petitti handing over the Big Ten trophy to Jim Harbaugh at the end. And if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm not letting go of that handshake. You give the trophy and shake the hand, and I am not letting it go. And I am posing for every single camera, and I am holding him back. You're going to stick with me for a long time, Tony. Keep smiling.
Yeah.
Keep smiling. I'm smiling. You keep smiling. We'll make that pose for 10 minutes if we have to.
With a super awkward stare, a Jim Harbaugh awkward stare right through his soul, right? Oh, boy. You're not sure. You think he's in the middle. I think the way he's handled it has been horrible. But you get to your point, maybe the decision is the right balance here that he's found. And by the way, it does back up that clearly they're interested in the man. They're interested in getting the man. The NCAA might say something different, but they want the person. And that's the way these penalties are going right now.
I don't want you to paint me as a person that thinks Tony Petitti is even keel on this either. To give this all out on a Friday on the Veterans holiday as Michigan is in the air, giving it to ESPN first before giving it to the university itself, this shows a level of personal pettiness on Petitti's part, okay, which doesn't sit very well with me on that. Plus, he also ramroded his way into Ann Arbor last Friday at the Michigan offices and saying we want an indefinite suspension. Rumor is we want an indefinite suspension of Jim Harbaugh until the NCAA's investigation is completed. That is one tough stance. And it's been pushed by the so-called victims, the other Big Ten coaches and their ADs who wanted this. And it might show that Tony Petitti is a bit of a pushover during this. And maybe that's why the rest of the coaches in the Big Ten are happy with him as a leader, because he can be easily manipulated. But he was definitely between a rock and a hard place, because I think Michigan's defense was pretty darn strong in the reaction, not only in the moment on Friday, how it was done with Santa Ono's letter the day before, and the actual fight back by the lawyers earlier in the week.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if you're under any illusion that Michigan isn't actually super pissed off about all this, the athletic department, they are super pissed off about how this has been handled.
It's dangerous.
Are pissed.
It's dangerous. It's a dangerous PO move, and I'm not talking about dangerous for Michigan. I'm talking about dangerous for the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're super pissed. The 50-year anniversary of the vote after the 10-10 ties coming up. So you're getting all these emotions. There's talk about, with a lot of your friends, I'm sure, who are listening here, about let's leave. Let's become buddies again with Notre Dame. Florida State wants to, let's ACC. All of these things have been discussed. And you have to wonder if it's in the back of people's heads right now. Is this worth it? And that's how pissed they are. Cooler heads will prevail, long term here, I am sure. And by the way, talking about the exit, there is historical precedence for this. We've talked about it, but Steve, I have kind of a summary of what happened in 1908 when we left the Big Ten. And I don't want to go through it all, but Michigan was clearly feeling ganged up on. But what we didn't have the support was of our president at the time in that situation. The actual meeting that they held to make all these restrictions on football, many of them targeted at Fielding H. Yost, was led by our own president, okay? Campus erupted. The students protested. The athletic department and the regents, we left the Big Ten. That's why we left. My story on Invictors that I wrote years ago on that has gotten thousands of hits from people. And I know it's MGO Blog and other people are linking to it and go, look what happened here. Look what happened here. There's a ton of similarities to what happened. I will say I feel like the program is bigger than a rivalry, a coach, an athletic director, a president. It is bigger than that. But we have really, really good memories on this stuff, man. Really good. Like the 1973, your mere mention, I heard you mention it on the pregame show, and I heard Sam Coyle, like when you said it's 1973. Sam wasn't born then. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that story and remembers. So I think we'll have a long memory. I'd just be really surprised if anything drastic happens, in the next decade with this. But what do you think?
There's a lot of anger going on. Talk about leaving the Big Ten is in the brainstorming phase. What if? A what if situation. Well, how would this go?
Doesn't hurt.
Michigan joining another conference would be cutting their nose off in spite of their face, because joining another conference probably means less money than what you're getting now. And you're going to be an interloper going into some other conference that has a tradition and a history and a way of doing things, and Michigan would be kind of the stranger.
Under the scenario that we're joining an already existing conference like the SEC or the ACC and not creating one.
Well, that's the more intriguing thing about creating one. Now, if you're creating one, then you're trying to get other teams to leave a good situation that they're in. Now, Florida State feels they're in a bad situation. Trying to get other people to join with you is kind of a tough sell. I'm not sure getting into bed with Notre Dame is a good idea either. I mean, how quickly we forget about the loss in trust and faith that Michigan has with this team as a business partner. Plus, you're asking Notre Dame to shed their independence, which is a tenet they clearly don't want to break. I think people will cool off after a while, but at the same time, Michigan has to be on guard, and the rest of the Big Ten doesn't, because it hasn't happened to them yet. But this lack of due process, it can be a very real thing, that as soon as somebody accuses somebody and you got like 1 ounce of proof but not a full investigation, decisions are being made. And when it was brought up to a panel of NFL players that Tony Batiti's acting like, Roger Goodell, this was on the ESPN show Get Up, all the NFL players just got very uncomfortable in their chair and made it well known. You do not want to have a situation where a single authority like that can act without due process or without complete knowledge of everything that went into it. And it was universal amongst the former NFL players that says, we're in a situation where the players are getting screwed and we haven't gotten back our rights from that time yet, when Roger Goodell took this action based on what people thought they wanted. They kind of wanted a czar. Now they don't want that czar because they saw what happened. And Michigan is the first victim of this. Michigan can go out and put evidence on other schools right now if they wanted to and get them in the same kind of trouble, as long as the Big Ten would want to listen to them. Michigan could present a whole bunch of things about other Big Ten teams, factual, concrete evidence, and the Big Ten's going, yeah, we're not interested in listening to your stuff right now. We want to handle what you're going through instead.
Fine. I would keep pushing the Purdue thing, though, from last year, the collaboration that they got our signs. I would keep pushing that button, and I would do what you're doing. I would make it known that we're having some conversations, and we'll see, man. So it's nuts. By the time this podcast drops, I'm sure there'll be a lot more, and we know there'll be more next week, Friday. Who knows if Jim will be on the sidelines.
Next week could be deja vu. I mean, the lawyers for each side will be battling in front of a judge Friday morning at 9:30, and Michigan will be heading to the airport again with Jim Harbaugh in the early afternoon.
Through all this, Steve, there's actually, with what we know now, I actually think there's a better chance that Harbaugh signs an extension now for some reason, just in my gut. I think he's seen how hard Michigan has pushed and supported him, assuming he still is thinking about the NFL. I wonder if this is all just going to come to a head, and as an act of defiance, Michigan is going to give him a contract that he wants, and he's going to sign it. I think it's more likely right now, believe it or not, than him just going, I'm out of here. Now, we win the national championship, maybe that changes. I don't know, but that's my thought.
There has been a lot of factions amongst the Michigan football program and its supporters since Lloyd Carr left and Rich Rodriguez took over.
For sure.
There are much fewer right now in wake of this.
There still are, by the way.
Yes, but there are fewer factions, much fewer factions.
There are.
There is a lot of rallying and support. Does that kind of change one's mind about that?
There is Michigan versus everybody. Are you Michigan or are you everybody?
Yeah, and there's still an NCAA investigation that is currently going on, but that seems, the information going into that seems to have trickled, and we'll talk more about that as the time goes on.
Can I give you one little update, Steve? Last week, we talked about the shirt that you lost the Professor and Pundit shirt.
Okay.
Then was returned to you at the pregame show. I found out a couple of details. First of all, the guy who kept the shirt is a friend, and he wanted us to know that he also lost the shirt after the fact. He lost it. He lost it.
When?
When? Someone like after the game. Some point after, in the shuffle, the shirt is lost again. So hopefully it's not out there in the cold, Steve, somewhere in the streets of Ann Arbor waiting for someone to pick it up, or some person looked at our faces and who are these guys?
Got picked up by Father Gabriel Richard's cleanup crew in row 36. Right. It was left at the game.
Here's the other update, Steve. So I asked our new listener, my man Lou, who I know is a lawyer.
Hey, does he have two wives too?
What's that?
He's not Big Lou.
No, he's not Big Lou.
He's not on ex-wife number 2?
No, he's not on number 2. He's not on meds 2. It's not Big Lou. Although, if Big Lou, you'd be a great sponsor if you're listening. Okay. So I said, well, Steve, does he have salvage rights? Does David rightfully own that thing he found? And Lou reminded us that Michigan has a very clear lost property law. And what David should have done, my friend who found the shirt, is he needed to file that with the police department. Submit a lost item report, and there's a legal process where you can legally claim it. That's the proper procedure for a lost item, is to report it. And then I assume there's a time period, and then he can claim it.
Look.
So I'll spare whoever found the shirt, if they're listening right now, it's yours. You got it. Okay.
Absolutely.
We have enough lawyers involved with Harbaugh, with all these other things. We need them focused on that, not on the lost shirt. Fair?
So fair.
Okay.
I'm just
Thank you, Lou, by the way.
I'm imagining, though, the giant lost and found at Michigan Stadium, or even at Chrysler Arena for that fact, because as a dad who has had his kids on running teams, okay, and there's like 100 kids, at the end of the year, it's not a box, it's tables full of clothing that
we've all seen.
On the market is like probably $1,000 worth of clothing sitting out there, still going unclaimed, even at the end of the year banquet. That's 100 kids. Let's multiply that by 1,000. The size of the lost and found for a season's long worth at Michigan Stadium has got to be filling up the Willow Run Airport dump site.
Yeah, I don't know what. They must be crazy. Like, or the place. It's great. Oh, Steve. So I have a rule on my Comcast to record every Michigan football, basketball, and hockey game that is aired, right? Okay. Automatically.
Yeah.
Well, this morning when I went to check out my replay because I was waiting, apparently it did tape it, but it was Fox Sports Deportes, the Spanish version of the game, which I didn't even know existed.
Is that a channel?
It was a Spanish-led broadcast team. It taped the Spanish version. So you know who I blame for this? Tony Petiti. TV boy. You screwed it up.
Get this fixed.
Yeah, fix this TV boy.
Is it your SAP mode was on or something like that?
It is an actual Spanish language broadcast on Fox Deportes.
Okay.
It's a separate team. It's not.
I didn't even know I had that.
It's not Joel Klatt. It's two guys speaking Spanish. Blake Corum. You listen for the names and stuff. You know.
You go go.
Yeah. Right. Only after the field goals did they do that. That'd be great. So that was cool. So yeah, my trip was epic. I gotta say. So we're leaving, right? And there's a big van for our crew taking us back to the airport. It was like a party on the van back, on the plane, like the whole time, just everyone reveling in. And again, I think part of this was the stakes involved. This wasn't like going to Nebraska and beating them down. And I've never seen the stadium before. It's so huge. It's so kind of put together. On the outside, it looks strange, like how they, just pieced it together. But the structure, you think about Michigan Stadium and all the fans, sure, we have the biggest, capacity. But the structure, Steve, I was up one of the highest levels. It is so huge. And you can just see everywhere because how high you are. And the interesting feature is you can kind of see everyone's cars because it's just completely surrounds the stadium. All the parking lot is just like a few blocks away from the stadium all the way around.
I think they're still trying to get out.
Yeah, they probably are.
Could you imagine, because there's gaps in there, they have the second largest collegiate football stadium behind Michigan. If they actually filled in the gaps on the upper side. It feels like they could have 125,000 people at that place.
Yeah, and they did a cool thing too, which most stadiums don't do because they want to sell the seats. They actually have, like, on the concourse level upstairs in the suites, 2 sides that are open air that are like these big overhangs with a ton of seats, and they didn't have numbers on them, so they're not sold. It's just optional. If you're in the suites, you can just go outside and get a really good view of the game. Again, Michigan didn't do that because they sold the suite. They could have had an open area, but they sold it, and that's what they do these days. Alcohol available.
Yeah, it's something that should be known because a lot of people don't like Happy Valley after being there, is that they finally are doing some stadium renovations. Now, this has been a topic at State College for a long time because they're really, really behind in upgrading, modernizing, and they finally got it passed. Now, why did it take so long for them to pass? Because it has been an argument for 15 or 20 years about getting this done, and it's not happening. There is a fear that in the new college football playoff expansion that stadiums and schools can only host if they meet a certain standard of being able to host a game.
And I've heard that the plumbing isn't winter friendly. They have to do some plumbing upgrades. Presumably, they blow the stadium out like you do. You have a cabin up north because the pipes can't handle the cold. So presumably, the game would be in December in the first round of the playoff.
Got to have running water at the stadium.
I will
Wouldn't
say
you think?
What you're saying. You would think like the suites weren't nice. The suites were great. Like they were really they're like just like Michigan, like top notch, beautiful up there. So they definitely put the infrastructure in up there. Presumably very expensive to do what they need to do in this place. Logistically, very hard to get around in and out of the stadium. Like just into the sections, like I just masses of people, and they have stairways you have to go up and down. Michigan doesn't have that problem. You enter and you go down into the bowl. Fans were great though, Steve. Like I didn't get that kind of vibe, like friendly fan vibe. From the last time I felt that way was when I went to Lincoln. It felt like that. I gotta say, and you saw tons of like Penn State and Michigan fans together, like walking in and out of the stadium. I don't know, maybe it was me. They were frustrated as heck after the game, but there was no like, screw you, Michigan, or any kind of nasty behavior. I don't know. I don't know. And the people I met upstairs, just very kind and very polite. I got to say,
well,
man, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking like these are like mini James Franklins running around like mad at the world. It was not that at all.
There is quite a contrast between our nearest neighbors, the ones in East Lansing and the ones in the Columbus. And when you get outside those two places, it's not too bad. Wisconsin's not great in that regard, but if you go most anywhere else, even in South Bend, people treat you well.
That's very comparable. Have you been there to Happy Valley?
No.
Okay. Is that one of the few you haven't been to? Or
there's a number of them I haven't been to because I've been doing the pregame show for so long, and
right.
we always stay at home.
You've been to Iowa for sure.
Yes, and multiple times.
Speaking of our Hawks, it looks like they are going to represent the West.
They have clinched a share for the lead. They
Suddenly
basically need to win one
in the
more.
West.
Yes, I know. It's crazy. They had their best win last Saturday, 22-0 shutout of Rutgers. Michigan beat Rutgers 31-7. Things started working for them, and things started clicking offensively. Believe it or not, Iowa threw their first touchdown to a receiver since September 16th. Greg, there's 5 teams with a 5-5 overall record, so I assume half of them next week will become bowl eligible.
So Northwestern kind of scrappy, man. Quietly kind of a cool story, Steve. I mean, I'm surprised. Like, I feel like they're turning it around here.
So they are.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the year, around conference play, I think it was universally assumed that the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten were Northwestern and Indiana. They beat Wisconsin. Northwestern beat Wisconsin. Wisconsin is in free fall. But I think the way Northwestern started, which was a huge loss at Rutgers to start the season, I want to say the score was like 24-7. Do you think any of our listeners know the name of Northwestern's coach?
I doubt it.
His name is David Braun.
Lloyd Braun.
Not Lloyd Braun.
No.
But David Braun.
No. You got to give him credit, man.
Because they have come from a very, very sharply divided locker room. And again, it was Northwestern against the world. They were actually in trouble for actually wearing those sweatshirts.
Yeah.
Remember on Media Day?
No, we talked about it. Yeah, we did.
Got in
it's
trouble
funny.
for that.
Yeah, and again.
Was Tony Battiti angry at them for that?
Well, I know. And it's like Michigan's the worst scandal. It's probably not the worst scandal this fall, like between Michigan State and Northwestern. What happened there brought coaches down. I mean, Come on.
That's right. It has been called the worst
history
in the history of college football.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh boy. So good stuff. What else, man? Oh, my I did mention that Ward was planning on visiting my history college athletics class. As I suggested, that might be a possibility. He did have to bail, Steve. But get this. I bumped into Ward, believe it or not, at the Penn State game. He saw me and he apologized in person. Well, that was nice. I mean, I'm like, Ward, no problem. I completely understand.
You're a little bit busy.
Yeah, so
preoccupied.
But I had an ace in the hole, and Carol Hutchins, the legendary Hutch, came in and took his place and did her amazing guest lecture on Title IX through her life in Lansing at Michigan State and Indiana, and then at Michigan, and that journey to become the all-time winningest sophomore. It's just incredible. So. Anyway, I had an upgrade, as I said, when Hutch was there. She goes, you had to say that. And I'm like, well, it was great. So anyway, how about a quick run through nationally? I didn't get to see much. I was busy traveling and at the game. But anything exciting happened?
No major upsets. The Washington and Florida State did have games decided late, but they're still undefeated. Georgia won convincingly over ninth-ranked Ole Miss. So the undefeated teams include one Big Ten team at the end of the year. Georgia is undefeated. Florida State's currently undefeated. So is Washington. That's your 4 undefeateds right there. And we're at a point in the season, Greg, where teams seed the finish line and start projecting, and whether they look ahead or play tight knowing what's all on the line, inexplicable upsets do start to happen in the middle of November all the way through Championship Saturday at the beginning of December. How many of those teams will fall victim to that? Your guess is as good as mine. But the king of the one-loss teams right now are Oregon, who lost in the last minute to Washington, Alabama, who lost to Texas. Texas is a one-loss team, but with a win over Alabama, and probably the loser of Ohio State and Michigan are the contenders.
I'm with you there. So you don't think if, let's say Michigan's one of those teams that stumbles at Maryland with all this stuff going on somehow, but we end up beating Ohio State and winning the Big Ten championship, where does that put us? Does that put us in the playoff?
I think it puts Michigan in a contender. I just don't think it puts Michigan in a playoff.
Because the loss is too bad.
The loss is not only bad, but I got to start to wonder that with all the things that are going on with Michigan, that they can just settle it by not putting them in the top 4. And then college football can concentrate on talking about their champion as opposed to dealing with this, true Hollywood story. that seems Michigan can just persuade everybody by going undefeated. I think they do have to go undefeated to be one of those 4 teams. And hopefully we don't have to argue about it. And that will exactly happen. But it's going to come down to Michigan and Ohio State. And again, a referendum on Michigan's renaissance.
Yeah.
Michigan's opponent is going to be Maryland. It's for win number 1,000, Greg. 1,000 in the history of Michigan football.
It's almost been washed away through all this stuff that's going on, that we have 999 wins.
What kind of treatment do you think it will get from the media this week? It'll be the first college football program to be on the verge of getting their 1,000th program win. If it can coincide with people who think Michigan will end up vacating wins.
I know it.
You talk about celebrating a university getting their 1,000th win only to find them at 973 or something when it's all said and done later on. I mean, I don't think it's going to vacate wins, but it's a possibility. And how do you treat that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Michigan's going to keep saying we have 1,000 wins, I'm sure. I think people are going to pile on. And I do think there are some stories going to come out about people kind of fisking through some of our games. I think one of our win was over Ann Arbor High School that we count, by the way, Steve, in the 1890s. So we only got our 500th, though, in 1967. Did you know that? So that's relatively recent, like on the back third of our history.
More games.
Yeah, playing more games. That's what it is. And of course, Bo came, and we've been on quite a streak since then, as far as consistently winning, despite recent years what went on. So I think that's going to be a big deal. The Roman numeral for 1,000 is M. Steve.
Oh, yes.
So Harbaugh, he's keenly aware, and they are toying around with what to do. What are they going to have rings that have the M and the Roman numeral? Are they going to But that will be, I think, part of something they want to do for the players.
The players get 3 rings this year?
I don't, who, you know.
A 1,000th win ring, a Big Ten championship ring, and a national championship ring?
I'm sure compliance is like sweating, like, you know, improper benefit, right? Even with NIL, you know, does that have to be a deal? Like maybe Lewis Jewelers, you know, makes the M rings, or, you know, they make Shinola watches with the, you know, a special edition. By the way, that fans would gobble up.
Oh, that was my first thought. I mean, if each player gets 3 rings, I mean, how many of them are going to end up on eBay? Because they'll have their favorite.
Yeah.
So Maryland got an ugly 13 win over Nebraska last weekend in Memorial Stadium in Lincoln, Nebraska. The Terrapins forced 4 interceptions and a fumble from the Huskers' 3 quarterbacks. There were 8 official turnovers in the game, Greg, but there was also 3 additional ones on downs. Ugly, ugly, ugly. With the win, it ended a 4-game losing streak for Maryland. They were 5-0 at the end of September. And we talked about Penn State having the same old story. The book on Maryland is that they're all extremely talented at skill positions. They win early, including beating ranked teams in non-conference play, and then they get hurt at key positions, and their lack of depth and their lack of defense, being below average, can get scored upon.
But hasn't that started to change in the last few years?
Greg, it has. And Mike Loxley has seen upgrades on both sides of the line, and their defense has been getting more respectable. But this year, the season-ending injuries didn't happen. It's not like Michigan's going to be facing Maryland's 5th-string quarterback like they have done in the past in College Park. But part of Maryland's story is that their rushing attack was so good last year. This year, it's struggling. And it doesn't help that they've played the conference's 2 best rush defenses in back-to-back weeks, and Michigan is coming up this Saturday. The turnovers they got against Nebraska were embarrassingly easy if you're a Cornhuskers fan. Nebraska's quarterbacks were literally lobbing balls directly into Maryland's defense where there's no receiver nearby. Thanks to Nebraska, the Terrapins now rank 1st in the conference with 13 interceptions, and they do have 28 sacks on the year, which is 4th in the Big Ten. So they have elements to their defense. And, of course, Michigan is probably facing the best quarterback to date, and that's Taulia Tagovailoa. He's number 1 in the conference in touchdowns and in passing yards, and he's got a receiving core not only in quantity but in quality with Ja'Shawn Jones, Ty Felton, Caden Prather, who's a transfer from last year, and tight end Corey Duchess. They all rank in the top 20 in the conference in receiving yards. Michigan now, going into this, is now the number 1 scoring team on both sides of the ball in the conference.
You can see, like, this kind of game, like, they have a chance to get maybe an explosive player or 2 on us or something, but they can't beat us for 60 minutes. This is not a good matchup for Maryland. I just can't see it.
Not the way that they have been playing.
Okay.
And they barely struggled to win in Lincoln again, 13-10. So,
cool.
Do you have any final thoughts?
Did you notice that Michigan wore the all-maize socks and sleeves and all that stuff? Do you remember the significance of this?
No, tell me.
So 2 years ago, they asked permission for Penn State to wear all maize uniforms in Happy Valley, and they said no, you can't do it. They need permission. So Michigan that game did the same thing. We wore as much maize as we possibly could. I'm telling you, just like we don't forget these things, we remember these things. That's why they did it, Steve. They wore as much maize as they could because of the 2 years ago when we asked to wear all maize there and we were denied. That's why we wore all maize, and we did it the last time. It's the only time we've done that. We did it again this time. Harbaugh doesn't forget these things. Yeah, so you know, I don't forget these things either.
Yes, and go on Twitter.
Yeah.
Michigan fans aren't forgetting much at all.
Nope.
So we just finished a podcast where Michigan beat Penn State, still in the hunt for a Big Ten championship, still in the hunt for a national playoff spot. As of right now, Michigan football back-to-back Big Ten champs, Greg, and looking for a three-peat. Go Blue, Greg.
Unbelievable. The game is looming. Can you believe it? Go Blue.